So it's Nihilus is back again right after the Not Cupcakes reading. In English because the fanfic which is following will be in English. It will be tagged not safe for work. So everybody who's not okay with club fiction and the like, please quit the video, shut it down right now. No, right now, do it. It's a story of a friend of mine. I will read it as the best I can, but if I stumble into laughing, I'm really sorry. So, let's begin. Chapter 1, Present Sins. The library was devoid of life. Oh no, I whispered, tossing the bag of groceries into the building, slamming the door shut once again. Spinning around, my frantic gaze jumped from building to building. Where was she now? I thought to myself desperately. Was it possible I could get to her before? No, I sighed. No, she probably left mere minutes after I did. In that case, she was probably already. I set off in a determined walk through the town. What was I thinking? I mentally asked myself as I questioned a few passerbys if they have seen my adopted daughter. She was just a little filly. It was foolish of me to think that I could leave her alone, even for the tiniest fraction of time. Fortunately for me, Nix stood out among the decency of Ponyville, and almost every pony I questioned had seen her at some point in the last half hour. It wasn't until I neared the border of the town that I received a definite location. Mr. Breezy's shop. Of course, I said out loud, after I thanked the mayor for the latest update. I should have known. A few minutes later, I stood outside of the fan shop. A wooden sign with "Sorry, we're closed" etched into it hung slightly loop-sided on the door. It was already too late. The door was, of course, locked, but simple cantrips soon corrected that. I pushed open the door slowly and crept into the building. The main room was populated only with counters and tables displaying fans of all varieties. Readying myself to shout for my daughter, I was interrupted by a guttural moan emanating from behind the door on the far wall. I quickly made my way across the room, behind the counter, and opened the door. There, in what looked like Mr. Breezy's study, I saw the obscene spectacle I had expected, but internally prayed against seeing today. On a worn red couch, Mr. Breezy lay on his back, his head awkwardly strained upward, staring at his crotch where Nix sat, slowly running her tongue up and down the length of his cock. Her waist sat discarded a few feet from the couch, but she still wore the headband and the magical glasses. She stuffed as much of his manhood as she could into her mouth and began to suck. Although I made no effort to be quiet as I infiltrated the pre-verse scene, apparently they hadn't noticed me. I made presence clear with a slight ahem. Mr. Breezy panicked. His latest grunt of pleasure quickly turned into a hacking cough as he choked on his own spit. Nix popped the dick out of her mouth as she turned towards me. "Hi, Mama," she said cheerily as she flashed me an innocent smile. As she pulled himself up to a less awkward sitting position, Mr. Breezy attempted to stammer out an excuse. "Twilight, it's not, she just..." His incoherent protestations developed into a moan as Nix climbed between his thighs and once more began licking his rod. I was awestruck. I didn't know how to handle this situation. I managed to resist the urge to rip Nix from her worship of Breezy's cock and storm out of the building, shouting furiously at my daughter. I had tried so many times to ingrain it in her that this type of behavior wasn't acceptable. Obviously, I had failed, demonstrated her as she unabashedly gave a relative stranger a blowjob in the presence of her own mother. Apparently, though, the issue of what to do would be decided for me, as Mr. Breezy soon attempted to tell my daughter something, but it just came out as a mess of syllables. Nix got the message, however. She stopped sucking and backed up, sticking her tongue out and holding her forehoofs in front of her chest like a dog begging for a treat. Mr. Breezy finished himself off with his hoof, and with a loud grunt began splattering the couch and black filly in front of him with cum. When he was finally finished, Nix swallowed any that had gotten in her mouth, whipped her glasses off with her hoofs, and giggled. "Thanks, mister. That was fun." "Nix! What did I tell you about doing this some sort of thing? I trusted you to stay at home, and look where you end up. sitting on some Stalion's couch covered in... I turned my chastising towards the other adult in the room. And you. I told you, if I ever caught you with my daughter again, the royal guards would be involved. Mr. Breezy only responded by looking down at the floor, suddenly embarrassed. We can go now, Mommy, Nick said, still wearing an innocent smile as cum dripped from her face. I turned to Mr. Breezy as levitated a blanket into his hooves. Just clean up. I don't want to touch your... Just clean up. The Earth Pony took the blanket and began rubbing it over the Alicorn filly. As she brushed over her wings, she cooed softly. I noticed the rubbing getting a bit more intimate as one hoof detached itself from the blanket and started rubbing her flank. I sighed, but apparently that wasn't enough of an indicator. Soon enough the blanket was ignored and tossed aside as Breezy rubbed both hoofs up and down, and a giggling Nyx feeling her up even as I stood in the same room. Was she really that irresistible? I wondered. Then I noticed that she was growing hard again. He was growing hard again, sorry. Nyx noticed as well. Oh, she gasped as she reached for his growing penis. I think that's enough, I said as I levitated Nyx onto my back, using her discarded vest to form a barrier between me and her still cum-soaked fur. I turned and made for the door. As I was about to return to the outside, daughter in tow, I heard Mr. Breezy talk from the entrance of his study. Twilight, if you like it so much, why not just let her... No! I interrupted as I hastily excited and slammed the door shut behind me, angry that he put what I was already thinking into words. My anger only intensified by the time I arrived home, having had to endure the stares of Ponyville's population. Nyx missed no opportunity to wave to any pony in range, attracting more attention. I made note to any stallion who waved back a bit too enthusiastically. I needed to form a list of potential locations if she ran off again. I closed the door to the library, and behind me, and Nyx hopped off my back. I'm going to run a bath for you, I said as I walked past her, not able to bring myself to look at her spotted fur. Mom? I turned around. She was looking directly at me. Are you mad at me? I sobbed. Yes, Nyx, yes, of course I was mad at you. I was angry and disappointed and frustrated that you apparently didn't understand what the problem was. That you even had to ask whether I was angry with you. No, Nyx, I told her, attempting to force a smile, but based on her reaction, it came out as more of a grimace. I'm not angry with you. I'm just stressed about this trip to Canterlot. Now come on, let's get you cleaned up. I've been thinking, Mom, Nyx said, after that bathtub had been filled with water, and her body was covered in suds. I was tackling a particularly stubborn spot of matted fur. Oh, I said in way of a response. Yeah, you were telling me that I shouldn't, have fun with strangers. Have fun? Is that what they call it now? I smiled and nodded. At least that part got through to her. Well, she continued, what about having fun with you? I stopped scrubbing. My heart felt like it stopped beating for a moment. I could already feel my face turning red with embarrassment. What? I managed to squeak out, hoping, praying that I had ever heard her wrong. I then noticed that I had stopped scrubbing with my hoof directly on her cunt. I jerked it back. You're not a stranger, she said matter-of-factly. We could have fun. I know that mares like it when I... Okay, that's enough, I interrupted, not particularly interested in hearing her confession. She simply shrugged and remained quiet. I resumed bathing her, despite how awkward it had become. As I ran the cloth up her sides and started cleaning her wings, she murmured softly in obvious pleasure, starting at me with half-lidded eyes. I attempted to notice as I moved from one wing to another. I felt the slightest pressure brushing against my hoofs. Quickly stopping my clean once again, I stood awed as Nyx's soapy wings slowly emerged. They were soon splayed in a grand manner, water dripping from them. She was still staring at me with those seductive eyes. Was my own daughter trying to... I think you're clean enough. Dry yourself off and get dressed. I have something I need to do. I turned around and bolted from the room without waiting for a response. Several hours later. I'm coming, I shouted. I rushed towards the front door of my library home, where a loud sharp knock had just entered it. Throwing it open with my magic, I saw just the pony I had hoped to. Applejack stood with a warm smile on her freckled face. "Applejack, I'm so glad you made it in time," I said cheerfully, ushering the blonde pony into my home as I tossed the package bag I was carrying onto the table. "I was worried that the message hadn't reached you. So hard to communicate without Spike around." "Yep, I got your message, and it came straight here, Twa," she said, her southern drawl as distinctive as ever. "You know, I already never let you down. So where's the little hellion?" "She's talking a nap right now. She had a busy day." "Yes, Applejack, I need someone I could trust. As the element of honesty, you were the perfect candidate. But that wasn't all. I needed someone who was absolutely indiscriminately, perfectly straight. That was essential." I knew Applejack was straight. We all did, thanks to the time we spent in Appaloosa. It was the night after peace had been properly brokered between the settlers and the buffalo. All of us were celebrating, and Applejack might have had a bit too much to drink. Her and Braybon were flirting with each other heavily. It was obvious, to me at last, from a sober and detached perspective, that they were very both interested in the other, but I didn't know if the booze could overcome their inhibitions. It did. After most of the other ponies had fallen asleep right on the floor of the saloon, Applejack grabbed her cousin's hoof and particularly dragged him upstairs. Sorry. The screams of ecstasy that soon echoed through the building woke up every pony in the building who hadn't drunk themselves into coma. We were all too polite to mention it in the morning, of course. I had heard rumors from Dash that her and Mac had fun on their private farm, of course, but this confirmed it. Despite a worrying fixation on her family members, Applejack was straight. That's why I chose her as my impromptu babysitter. I told my friend to make herself at home as I rushed up to my bed where Nick slept soundly. A light stir woke her up. She blinked several times. "Hi, Mom." "Hey, kid, listen. I'm about to leave for Canterlot and, well, I decided to get you a babysitter." That woke her up. "What?" she yelled, hopping to her hoofs. "A babysitter?" "Yes, Nux. When I left you here alone today, that was a test, to see if I could trust you here alone. Obviously, I can't. That's why my good friend Applejack will be watching you until I get back." I motioned to the lower level, where Applejack stood. She gave a little wave. "But Mom, I can't—" Her protest was interrupted by 3 loud knocks on the door. "Oh, that will be my ride. I have to get going. Bye, Nix. Love you." I gave a quick peck on the cheek before walking over to Applejack, leaving my daughter sputtering protests. "Applejack, if any stallions showed up while I'm gone, tell them we're not home. We're busy. You're just house-sitting, whatever you have to say to get rid of them," I whispered quietly to my friend as I made out of the door. "Oh, that mean you have some suitors after all, Twa?" "I never would have thought." The farm pony chuckled approvingly. "Not me." It took her a bit to get it up. "You mean, but just a filly? Why, if any stallions do show up, I'll do more than just show 'em away. I'll send Big Mac after 'em," she said, riled up. I smiled at her passion. "Thank you, Applejack, but that won't be necessary. I'm trying to handle this on my own terms." Another knock at the door. "I'll be back in about a week. There should be enough food to keep you all fed. Thank you again." I opened the door where 2 armored Pegasus stood, faces unreadable. "Sorry to keep you waiting, sirs. We can leave immediately." I closed the door behind me and hopped into the chariot. It wasn't long before Equestria was rolling by underneath me. 10 minutes later. "Oh, I forgot my bag!" I shrieked to one of the flyers of my vehicle to turn around immediately. 10 minutes later. The door was locked. That's odd. Did it go out already? I unlocked the door easily and entered my home. My bag was no longer on the table where I had put it. Was my short-term memory failing? Then I spotted it. All the contents have been dumped and I sat empty near the doorway to the kitchen. I walked over to it, simultaneously levitating the items back into the bag. I was about to call out for Applejack when I heard a whiny coming from the kitchen. No, I thought. The similarity with the incident earlier today not failing to gain my notice. I rushed into the kitchen and, at first, everything seemed normal. A few of the groceries I had purchased that same day sat out on the counter, obviously in the beginning stages of forming a fabulous meal. I walked around the corner and gasped, my fears realized. Applejack sat with her back against the cupboards, the brim of her hat clenched between her teeth in an attempt to stifle any moans. Her entire body shook. Nix lay between her strong thighs, full tongue lapping away at her pussy. Applejack saw me and glanced up, blushing furiously. She was obviously ashamed to be found in this position, but made no attempts to rectify it. "I was gone for 20 minutes. I shrieked at the pair. No, I wasn't going to stand for this. I tore my daughter away. Applejack groaned in frustration. She spit out the head and brought her hoof to her clit, rubbing herself in a frantic attempt to get her release. I could only stare at the once proud earth pony, reduced to shamelessly masturbating on my floor. She let out a loud whiny as she soon brought herself to orgasm. I grunted her a moment to catch her breath. "I didn't know you were into girls, Applejack, especially fillies," I said coldly. She managed to get to her feet and threw her head back on, where she said was covered in her juice. I wasn't. It's just, your daughter's got quite a tongue." "Thanks," Nix interrupted, obviously pleased with the compliment. "Whew, I gotta tell Rainbow about this one," she continued as she walked past more towards the door, maintaining enough sense to tell that she's no longer welcome. Panic flooded me. "No, you can't tell anyone about this, Applejack. It will ruin our lives." "Yeah, sure, whatever you say, Twa," she replied. I noticed that her legs were still quivering. Applejack opened the door and exited the scene, without so much as an apology or hint of remorse. "Damn it," I said. If the Pegasus were annoyed when I told them they would have to wait, they didn't show it. Just in case, I gave them a hoofful of bits and told them to back in an hour. Initially somewhat reluctant to abandon their professional duties, they nonetheless wandered off after some insistence. Returning to kitchen, I found Nix lying on the floor. She was voraciously running her tongue rapidly over the floor where Applejack's juices had been. I patiently allowed her to finish. At least it saved me the trouble of having to clean it up myself. Minute by minute, her tongue bath of the kitchen floor slowed. Eventually, she gave the floor one final passionate kiss. She licked her lips, eager to lose not a drop of the precious liquid. Looking up at me with a smile, she sighed contentedly. I raised an eyebrow at her, annoyed. "Are you quite finished?" "Yep," she replied, hopping to her hoof. "So what do we do now?" What indeed? I shouldn't bring her to the Canterlot. It was simply far too risky to have her in close proximity with Celestia. I considered calling Spike away from his previous obligations. After all, he was a baby dragon, not even of the proper age yet. Nix couldn't seduce him if she tried. Then I recalled how well he handled Fluttershy's animals during the dragon incident. No, Nix would escape his grasp within minutes. I could already see the frantic letters he would send detailing his incompetency. Was the answer really another babysitter? Applejack had failed because she was apparently bisexual without realizing it. I admit I had failed to account for that. I told Nix to follow me as we trotted outside. Maybe a bit of fresh air would improve my private brainstorming session. My mind wandered and I began to think. What could have caused this? Was there some latent part of nightmare emerging? It's a matter I yearned to discuss with Celestia, as she would know better than I ever could. No, there's no hope in underestimating it. The best I could do was attempt to contain it and to keep her safe. That was my only concern. Nix was rambling on about something as we passed at Sugar Cube Corner. The door to the confectionery connoisseurs building opened and I almost ran into another member of the Apple family. I grinned widely at the stallion as he marched into the street, happily munching on candy. Caramel noticed me staring at him and slowed down to hold the corner of his mouth twitching upward as he formed his own nervous smile. "What?" he stammered. "Want to get to something to drink?" We lay under the tree, Nix at my side. I nursed a cup of tea, while Caramel sipped a steaming coffee. Nix had finished her drink and was now trying to inch closer to Caramel without me noticing. I pulled her back to my side every few minutes. "Caramel," I said after a few minutes of silence, "I need a favor." He finished his drink and smiled at me. I figured as much. I can't see why else you would have wanted to spend time with me." "No, it's not like that. It's just..." "Nix, stay put. It's just I think you're the only person I can trust with this job." The answer was that Applejack simply hadn't discovered her identity as bisexual. Caramel was different, as he had discovered and embraced his homosexual nature. Plus, if Nyx did attempt to seduce him, Caramel would likely to be intimidated by my daughter to do anything. This was perfect. I need you to watch my daughter while I'm away in Canterlot. Royal business, you understand. The house is fully stocked and it should only take me about a week. He said nothing. I can pay you if that's the problem. No, Twilight, that's not the problem. You said I was the only person you could trust with this. Why? Surely one of your friends would be better suited for the task. I sighed. Cal may have been forgetful, but he wasn't stupid, and I figured he would notice something strange. So I told him. I told him everything from the beginning. His eyes grew wide at the first mention of Nyx rutting a stranger. My daughter stared at his crotch, no doubt looking for any sign of an erection as I regaled him with tales of Nyx's promiscuity. I admitted, my curious gaze followed hers more than once. To his credit, he didn't appear to get aroused. Perfect. I ended the talk with confessing Nyx's last victim, his relative. He looked particularly shook up at that. I don't understand. Why do you trust me then if even AJ betrayed you? Really? Are you really going to make me say it, Cameron? I mean, you are immune to Nyx's advances because, well, you aren't interested in that sort of thing. You make it pretty obvious, Caramel. You and Big Mac, all the time alone on the farm. Twilight. It's just the way you Twilight. Blaming you or saying it's wrong. Twilight. Ha! Dig in ass. Twilight, I'm not gay. I blinked at him several times. What? I'm not gay, Twilight. I could see tears beginning to form the corners of his eyes. Nyx started giggling. But I could have sworn. He leapt up and began walking away. I tried to apologize, but it only came out as a hoarse whisper. Caramel had dissolved into sobbing before he was out of view. I guess you're going to Canterlot, Nyx. Yay! Nyx cheered. Well, kind of a funny club thing, I would say. I died nearly 3 times from laughing. As you might noticed or not, I don't know if it's on the recording, a friend of mine joined the TeamSpeak channel and just blurred out and screamed a little bit and then left again. And my mother said good night at one particular part of the story, so it was a little disturbing to read that then at this point, so I hope you realized which moment it is. If not, ask me. I have it branded in my memory forever now. I had to read the clubfic in front of my mother for a part. That's just so plain wrong. Okay, now I'm going to do Fallout Equestria, I think would be the next asset, yeah, and then end this day or night with Sugar Cube Corner. I hope you stay put, and as I said, Not Safe for Work Chapter 2 will be much more screwed up, I just heard, and I will enjoy reading it because it's fun. Okay, see you next time.